Passengers of the Night, out in theaters, new French film from director Michael Hers, which I was shocked to learn when the credits rolled after the movie, because I could have sworn this film was made by a woman. It has a certain feminine quality to itself, in a very good way. It feels like a story told by a woman. In any case, I really liked Hers's previous film Amanda, and I liked this one even more. It's kind of difficult to describe what it is about, especially since the plot takes the back seat. It's not the most important thing here. It's one of those movies that are more about the atmosphere and the characters. But I'll try to give a brief explanation anyway. The film is split into two halves. One takes place in 1984, the other one in 1988, 4 years later. In both these time periods, we spend some time in the company of a small Parisian family. In 1984, they are a freshly broken family. Charlotte Gainsbourg's character, Elisabeth, has just been abandoned by her husband, and now she and her two teenage children are in a state of disarray. Each of them is trying to sort of find themselves, to reinvent themselves. Elisabeth, because she needs to find work for the first time. The kids, because they are coming of age and they are figuring themselves out as adults. Then in 1988, it's a different picture. The family is now much more harmonious. They seem to have found themselves in many ways to stabilize their lives and enjoy their time together. And what connects those two moments in time is that in both of them, another person unexpectedly comes into the lives of the family, a young woman named Talulah. In both periods, she ends up crashing at the family's apartment for a while, and her arrival is this sort of additional catalyst for change and for figuring oneself out, especially in the case of the son Matthias. And also Talulah is the closest of all the characters in the film to embodying the title. She's a passenger of the night, a person without family, without purpose in life, without her own place and occupation. She traverses the Parisian nights in search of life and joy and meaning. I think that's as much as needs to be said about the plot itself. What you really have to know is that the film is fantastically atmospheric, and at the same time I think it's masterful in its duality. See, the title and the character of Talulah and the fact that Elisabeth herself takes up work during nights at a local radio station, all of those things would suggest to me that the movie will be very night-like, that it would focus on those outcasts, on people living slightly outside of regular society, even just by virtue of functioning outside of regular sleeping hours. I thought it would be purely about a certain longing, about loneliness and aimlessness and solitude. And yes, it kind of is about that, but even more so it is about family, about being there for one another, about supporting each other and finding connections with other people, about warmth and love and compassion. And I just can't stress enough how remarkably well done it is in terms of balancing those two opposites, really, letting them coexist and not necessarily pitting them against one another. It's showing you both of them side by side, and also exploring how people can change from one to the other. But there is very, very little judgment and also very little sentimentalism. One of the key lines towards the end of the film is this sort of poetic description of Passengers of the Night as people who exist in your consciousness as memories of single moments, single points in time, which I think is very poignant, but it is at the same time immediately countered by the movie making a point about the importance of permanence, of being there for one another for longer periods of time, even as we change and evolve. I mean, the performances are great, the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. I loved how so many of the shots of the film are framed against the night city of Paris, especially the ones with the background view of the city as seen from the apartment's windows, and the ones with Elisabeth walking across the bridge next to the radio station. Both of those shots sort of reappear and reoccur throughout the film. The music fits the images perfectly, creating a sort of dreamlike state at times, a feeling of the whole movie being not exactly real in a good way. I mean, it's difficult to describe it precisely, but it has this sort of film-like quality. It feels kind of like a lost memory, I would describe it that way. I liked it a lot. I think it's an incredibly lyrical, atmospheric and ethereal film. It swept me off my feet and captured me completely. I cannot say I recommend it to everyone because I think it's not for everyone. if you need a galloping, eventful plot and action, you won't find much of interest here. But if you can allow yourself to be sort of slowly submerged in this atmosphere of a not entirely real 1980s Paris with those characters who are struggling to find themselves, you'll love it just as much as I did.